Hello, Oasis. Hey. What's up? How's it going? Oh, that was weak. What's up? How's it going? Whoa, you guys did not disappoint. I'm so glad you're here. So over the past couple of days, I've been able to talk to a few of you because I know this new movie came out. It's called A Quiet Place Day One. Has anybody in here seen it? Okay, so look, I love you. You are made in the image of God. There is no flaw in you, but I do not understand how you like horror movies. I don't like being scared. Spiders, that just does me and I can't do anything else. I don't like jump scares. I don't like the tension that comes with horror movies. But I did some research this week to figure out why some people God designed might like these movies. And I found some really interesting things. Some people suggested that you might be an adrenaline junkie, so you're just really addicted to this feeling of the rush of adrenaline, so you probably enjoy riding really, really tall roller coasters. But those of you I know who watch this movie, you're not adrenaline junkies, and I was like, that doesn't add up. And I kept reading some articles, and I found that the success of horror movies comes down to your ability to control and to understand that you have control in the environment you're in. So think about it. You're about to go see A Quiet Place Day One, so you go to the movie theater. You know you're gonna be in a room with a screen. You know that you're gonna get to sit in a very nice, comfy chair. If you get freaked out, you can go outside and grab some comfort food and come back in. You're in control of the environment. The scary person you see on the screen is not gonna end up at your house. He's not gonna end up at your dorm. He's not gonna end up at your workplace. You have control over where you see the scary person, okay? The second thing is that you know that there's a time limit. So you know within about 2 hours, you never have to watch this movie again. You have control of the time, and if it's too scary, there's an exit door and you can come out. You have control. And what I think is so fascinating about these movies is that the directors actually provide you with a sense of control. See, the way that it's crafted is that they give you music and they give you visual cues to let you know when something scary is about to happen. So when you hear that creaky door or the creaky staircase, or in Jaws when they have the theme music for the shark where it's dun-dun, dun-dun. You know that shark is coming and it's about to surprise you. They give you audio and visual cues to let you know that something scary is gonna happen. They give you a sense of control. And tonight, we're talking about chaos. It's the exact opposite of control. We're talking about these moments in our lives where there is disorder, there is dysfunction, there is disarray, it's uncomfortable, you don't want to be there, you have no way to figure out what you're doing. And we're asking this question, what do you cling to when chaos confronts you? Because I think a lot of times we step into our lives and we think it's kind of like a horror movie. You get to cling to something to help you cope through the scary parts. And that's true. But what we cling to is really important because we can cling to a lot of things. And so tonight we're picking up our stories with the kings and we're gonna look at some of the things that they cling to. And so if you have your Bible, I invite you to turn to 1 Kings chapter 12. And 2 weeks ago we left off with our king named Solomon. And so Solomon, he's gonna pass away and his son Rehoboam is gonna take the throne. But if we remember Solomon, he placed heavy burdens on the people of God. He put a lot of them into forced labor. He had a really lavish lifestyle, and so he put heavy taxes on them in order for him to pay for his lifestyle. And the people of God, for years and years and years, they've been oppressed, and they've been serving an abusive leader. And so imagine, it's Rehoboam's first day on the job, and they're gonna approach him. And in verse 4, they approach Rehoboam and they say, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us. But now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." It's day one. Rehoboam is becoming king, and he's already met with a mob of thousands and thousands of people that have not been treated well, right? Emotions are high. He doesn't know what's gonna happen depending on how he responds. And so he asks for some help. And he gets two options and two different ways he could go here. Picking up in verse 6. We see that Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. They replied, "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them, you will give them a favorable answer and they will always be your servants. But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, "What is your advice? How should we answer these people to say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" The young men who had grown up with him replied, "These people have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than your father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions." All right, so Solomon, if we remember, kind of an oppressive and abusive leader, and the people of God are saying, "Hey, we need change. We're not supposed to be led this way. You need to lead differently." And Rehoboam has two choices. He can either serve the people, he can either be the king that he is called to be, or he can be worse. He can seek even more for himself, and he decides he's going to seek more for himself. When Rehoboam is met with the chaos of these thousands of people asking him to do something, he chooses to cling to his power when he loses control. He's like, "No, you don't get to tell me what to do. My job is to tell you what to do, and I'm going to make sure you know it." And we see in this moment that Rehoboam actually begins to resemble the kings of the rest of the world, because the kings that God calls in the Bible, they're called to be shepherds. They're called to look out for their flock. They're called to look out for the least, the lost, the last, the left out, the left behind. Like, that is how God's kingdom operates. And the kings are supposed to operate differently than the kings of the world. But Rehoboam here is going to look like every other king that God does not appoint. He's going to look like the kings that when they're questioned, they increase power. When cries of injustice are poured out, they offer more oppression to silence them. This is who Rehoboam is becoming. And this is just the beginning of the chaos of this story. Because imagine you're Israel. You've been silenced for years, and you're finding out that this guy's actually going to be worse than the guy that was leading you beforehand. You'd be really excited, right? You're like, "Man, I'm so excited Rehoboam just became king. Oh, it's going to be a great time." No, you would not be excited. You would want to control the situation, right? You would want it to change. And so what does Israel do? Because at this point, they're remembering this promise that God gave to Rehoboam's grandfather, David. They're like, "God, you promised David that you're going to set someone on this throne that would lead us, that'd be our shepherd, that would rescue us from our enemies, that would lead us in this way of life." And once again, we're being let down. Like, where are you? Because you're not delivering. This king is not here. It's not him. You're not doing your job. You're not working fast enough. Maybe we should take matters into our own hands. And this is exactly what Israel does. In chapter 12, verse 16, we hear that when all Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David." When Israel is confronted with chaos, they don't seek the word of the Lord. They don't remember his promise. They seek self-preservation. Like when all this is going on, Israel clings to self-preservation when their government fails them. They sing this battle cry of saying, "Go to each of your own tents and do what you can to take care of yourself. Look after yourself. It's all about you. Do what you can to make sure that you feel safe, that you don't feel uncomfortable. Do what you can." But in this process, they're actually starting a coup. And how Israel responds and starts this coup forever changes the history in the Bible. It forever creates chaos and division in everything that we read. And I need to show you this map here, because Israel is actually made up of 12 tribes. And during the time of David and Solomon, all 12 tribes were together. They're one nation, and we called them the United Kingdom. But after Rehoboam makes this decision, 10 tribes of Israel will reject him as king, and they will flee to the north and to that yellow part, and they will become the nation of Israel. They will anoint their own king, and they will reject the leader that God has appointed over them, even though he's not great. Like, he could do a lot better. The other 2 tribes, they'll remain in Judah, that orange section. They'll still be led by Rehoboam. And so from the rest of the point forward, we now have two different timelines that we're tracking, because we're going to have kings in Israel in the northern part of the kingdom that are part of Rehoboam's timeline. And we're going to have kings in the south in Judah who are part of David's lineage. And from this point forward, it kind of just feels like a mess. But here's the thing, God actually never left the mess. He had been there the whole time. And this moment where it feels like everything is chaotic, where there's no organization, where it's every man for himself, God's actually been there the whole time. You see, when Solomon was reigning, he had this guy working for him named Jeroboam. Jeroboam was in charge of the forced labor unit. So remember those 30,000 people that Solomon put into slavery? Jeroboam was in charge of making sure they were doing what they needed to. So Jeroboam was this pretty high-ranking official. And as Solomon became more and more disobedient, a prophet came up to him and said, hey, the word of the Lord came to me, and God, like his word says that you're not going to be king. Like Jeroboam one day will be king. And Solomon got pretty frustrated. He's like, oh, Jeroboam is not going to be king. I'm not going to let that happen. So he tries to kill Jeroboam, and Jeroboam flees. All right, but then Solomon dies. And Jeroboam is like, dude, I'm not at risk anymore of losing my life. So he comes back to the nation of Israel. And this moment where Rehoboam is being confronted by a mob, guess who's in the mob? Jeroboam. This moment where the people of God are trying to figure out who should rule over them when they're taking matters into their own hands, God has actually gone before them and has chosen a king to anoint over them. And so in the kingdom of Israel, this guy named Jeroboam, he's going to rule over them. Those 10 tribes, they're going to choose him as their king. And in the nation of Judah, Rehoboam, from Solomon and from David, he will continue to rule over the people of Judah. And we see that no matter how good or bad a king is, no matter how good or bad their choices are, like God never left the mess. He was still there. He never abandoned his people. He never took a nap. He never slept. He never said, maybe I'll pick this back up tomorrow when I'm not as stressed out. God was still there, and God was still working even when it was silent, even when they felt abandoned. God never left the mess. And he's going to continue to work through this mess, this chaos, to rescue his people. And Jeroboam, he's going to be given the same instructions as every other king. He's going to be invited to walk in the way of God, to lead God's people in the way that they deserve to go, to walk in faithfulness and to walk in obedience. And even in the midst of chaos and disorganization, when a nation is split in two, Jeroboam is invited to participate in this work. Chaos is often an invitation for us to participate in the work God has started and the work that he will complete. And this feels really good. Like Jeroboam's becoming king, he's being commissioned, and it's like, man, finally, maybe a good king. He's rescuing these people from the hands of Rehoboam, who's kind of a not so great king. And we get really hopeful because we're like, man, we're finally doing it. We're finally getting a king. And everything quickly comes crashing down. Because we need to pull up this map again. You see, there's a really important location, and it's the temple. And the temple is in Jerusalem. It's in Judah. Where does Jeroboam rule? Israel. There's 10 tribes of people in Israel that once a year, at least, will travel down to Judah in order to worship God. Once a year, Jeroboam's subjects, the people that are called to serve him, will travel to Rehoboam's territory and will be influenced by him. Now imagine this with me. It's completely hypothetical, completely imaginary, but imagine that in order to graduate from SDSU, once a year, this is all hypothetical, once a year you had to take a class down in Vermilion at USD for a couple of weeks. Not so great. Like, we all know Brookings is a little bit better, okay? But imagine that once a year you had to spend a couple of weeks in Vermilion. Once a year you had to be instructed by the profs down there. You'd have to live in the dorms down there. You'd have to eat the food in their dining hall. You would use their wellness center. You would hang out in their student center. Once a year you'd have to do this. Now, most of you, you'd be like, man, like Brookings, SDSU, I'm still a jackrabbit. I try to just forget about those few weeks of the year, and I come back here and I'm still gonna, be a full-blooded jackrabbit. But you might see a few things that you like a bit better down in Vermilion. Like maybe, I know, it's a long shot, but you might. Maybe their showers have really good water pressure. Maybe their dining hall serves like that one really great meal that Larson doesn't serve. Maybe they have less people at the gym, and so it's like a lot easier for you to get your weightlifting session in. Maybe their profs are a little bit nicer and their courses are a little bit easier and you kind of want to stay there. Like even if you didn't really want to go to school there, you would come back and you'd be like, man, did you see what they're doing in Vermilion? Maybe Barry Dunn should do that here. You might start questioning the leadership. And this is what Jeroboam's afraid of. He's like, man, if my people travel down to Judah once a year, they're going to see what Rehoboam's doing. And they might have really good restaurants down there. They might have really good scenic places. Rent might be cheaper. They might even go so far as to leave my country and go live in his country. And we see that we get an inside look into Jeroboam's brain as he's processing this. We hear that Jeroboam thought to himself, the kingdom will now likely revert to the house of David. If these people go up to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, they will again give their allegiance to their lord Rehoboam, king of Judah. They will kill me and return to King Rehoboam. Jeroboam's kind of met with a situation that he doesn't have control of. He's met with this situation where, oh man, he could lose some people. He could lose some power. He could lose some authority. He doesn't have 100% complete control over the people of God, and this scares him. But we got to keep reading to see what he does. Jeroboam seeks some advice, and after doing so, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. One he set up in Bethel, and the other in Dan. And this thing became a sin. The people came to worship the one at Bethel, and went as far as Dan to worship the other." Jeroboam is craving 100% total control over his people, and he knows that the worship of God will get in the way of that. So what does he do? He builds 2 new temples in the northern kingdom of Israel. He constructs 2 golden calves, images he makes himself, and he puts them in these temples. And he says, here you go. Here are your gods. Here's the living God that you worship. Jeroboam will go so far to keep his power that he will literally hand Israel fake gods and tell them to worship them. Jeroboam clings to idol worship when his reputation is threatened. You see, idol worship is a trap, and Jeroboam knows this. He does it on purpose. Have you ever tried to download, you never tried to download. You always have social media on your phone. I don't think you try to download it. It's just there. But have you ever tried to go on a social media fast? It's kind of hard. You delete Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat off your phone, and then just because you physically delete it doesn't mean that it's still not in the back of your mind, because usually you delete it and then 5 minutes later you pull out your phone and you're trying to scroll and you realize, oh shoot, I don't have that app anymore. It's still there. It still speaks to us. It still draws our attention. And Jeroboam is now going to actively build traps for people to have their attention drawn away from the true and living God, just so he can keep his power, just so he can keep his authority. He will cling to idol worship in order to keep his reputation. But God's still in control. And God will confront Jeroboam. And God will invite Jeroboam to participate in what God has started, what God is doing, and what God will continue to do. We see that God is actually going to send a prophet to confront Jeroboam in this, because God wants Jeroboam to know that there is only one true and living God. He can't be made, he can't be crafted, he can't be formed by any physical material. Actually, he made us right? This is the true and living God. God in his grace will remind Jeroboam that every single ounce of power that Jeroboam has actually been gifted to him. It's been granted to him. It's been allowed to him. Jeroboam's word is fleeting. It is not final. His life is temporary, not eternal. He doesn't actually control everything. And in 1 Kings 13, God will send a prophet to confront Jeroboam right as he is about to offer a sacrifice to a fake god. And we read that by the word of the Lord, a man of God came from Judah to Bethel, as Jeroboam was standing by the altar to make an offering. By the word of the Lord, this prophet cries out against the altar. Altar, altar, this is what the Lord says. A son named Josiah will be born to the house of David. On you he will sacrifice the priests of the high places who make offerings here, and human bones will be burned on you. That same day, the man of God gave a sign. This is the sign the Lord has declared. The altar will be split apart, and the ashes on it will be poured out. When King Jeroboam heard that what the man of God cried out against the altar at Bethel, he stretched out his hand from the altar and said, "Seize him." But the hand he stretched out toward the man shriveled up so that he could not pull it back. And the altar was split apart, and its ashes poured out according to the sign given by the man of God, by the word of the Lord. So this prophet is delivering news to Jeroboam. And we need to take careful attention to the words that this prophet delivers, because this prophet is proclaiming that our God is a living God. He's not blind. Like the idols that Jeroboam has created, they're blind. They don't see the actions. They don't hear the actions of the kings. They are completely oblivious because they're not real. But our God is a living God, and he has seen the actions of every single king, from Saul to David to Solomon to Rehoboam to now Jeroboam. Our God has seen what they have done. He has seen when they have worshiped well, and he has seen when they have failed. He has seen when they have an intentionally built evil, and he has seen when they have accidentally sinned and unintentionally sinned. Our God has seen it all because he is living. And God is warning Jeroboam that in his power, he will raise up a new king to get rid of every single idol and false god and altar that has been crafted. A day is coming when Jeroboam's influence and his authority is going to be nothing. A day is coming. And even if God's word isn't enough, the prophet gives a sign, something that God will do in order for Jeroboam to know that this is going to happen. All right, and this sign, I love this sign. Because the sign is at the altar that Jeroboam is about to sacrifice a fake idol on, it's going to crumble. The altar where he goes to worship a fake god, it's going to turn to ash. It's going to turn to dust. Like, isn't this incredible that our God is going to prove that he is the living God by proving that Jeroboam's God is false? There is only one God who can create order from chaos, and it is the true and living God. Only God can do this, and God is gracious enough and merciful enough to invite Jeroboam. As much as this is a rebuke, it's also an invitation for Jeroboam to change. He's done a lot of terrible things, but it's an invitation for him to turn, to see the evidence of the living God, and to be made new, to change the ways that he leads his people. But Jeroboam will choose to cling to the facade of his control, and he will look at this prophet who has delivered this news to him, and he will stretch out his hand. And guess what? He doesn't even have the authority to stretch out his hand. God will take that away. He's trying to stretch out his hand in order to order his guards to kill the prophet who delivered truth, and he can't even stretch out his hand without it crumbling. Think about that. Our God is a true and living God, and his word is powerful, and he will make sure that his truth is heard. Just the word of the Lord is enough to make chaos cease, and he will prove this to Jeroboam. And in this moment, this altar is split. And Jeroboam is confronted with the reality that a king God has promised will come. Josiah, this king, is going to come, and he's going to destroy every single thing that Jeroboam has made. Jeroboam had the opportunity to turn and to repent, but he will choose to cling what is fake. He will cling to his reputation, his power, his authority. He will choose to turn away from the truth of who God is. He will choose to turn away from the word of the Lord that makes peace. that makes stillness, that quiets the waters, He will turn away from all of it. And again, we're at this moment where it's like, man, God's finally going to deliver. Yay. I'm really tired of these terrible kings. They're really depressing. We're like, God's going to deliver. Josiah is not born for another 300 years. It's going to be a while. And the story just continues to become chaotic. Over and over and over again, kings fail. And in the northern nation of Israel, the place where Jeroboam is ruling, the kings won't be remembered as kings that are just bad. They'll be remembered as evil. They didn't just make the wrong decision, they actively opposed God. Like, they actively work to prevent God from doing what He does best. They actively work to keep their people from them. They are evil. And in the southern nation of Judah, these kings will also be pretty bad. And only few of them will give us a glimmer of hope. And we're left waiting 300 years for Josiah to come. We're left waiting, hoping that Josiah can come. And it's just hopeless, right? Like, it's just a story of chaos. Like, where are the boundaries? When does it stop? Like, when is God actually gonna finally keep His people from worshiping what they shouldn't? When is God actually gonna finally restore? Like, we're still hearing these questions like, God, when are you gonna do what you say you do? Why does it take so long? Why does it take 300 years? And we see in this moment that God will start preparing the ground for Josiah to come. And so if we look at this map again, all right, Jeroboam's gonna be in Israel. Rehoboam's been in Judah. Rehoboam will have a son, and then that son will have a son named Asa. Asa gets to rule in the last few years that Jeroboam is reigning up north. So while Jeroboam is leading everybody into idol worship, Asa's gonna go against the grain. He's gonna get a little bit fidgety. He's gonna say, this isn't right. We're not supposed to do this. And nobody before me has done this well except for David, but this isn't right. And we read in chapter 15, in the 20th year of Jeroboam's reign in Israel, Rehoboam's grandson becomes the king of Judah. And Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as his father David had done. He expelled the male shrine prostitutes from the land and got rid of all the idols his ancestors had made. He even deposed his grandmother Maacah from her position as queen mother because she had made a repulsive image for the worship of Asherah. Asa cut it down and burned it in the Kidron Valley. And although he did not remove the high places, Asa's heart was fully committed to the Lord. Jeroboam is leading his people into idol worship, and Asa is going to start cutting things down. He's going to start the work, and it's not going to get finished, but he's going to start the work. And what I love about Asa is the fact that it didn't get finished, because I think we can really relate to that. Like, I think there's a lot of things in our lives where, like, we don't get them finished. But guess what? God didn't look at the fact that Asa completed or didn't complete something. He looked at Asa's heart. Asa trusted God enough to know that if he didn't complete, if the timeline wasn't right, if he would never get to meet Josiah, it wasn't about the task, it was about his heart. And for Asa, it's enough to worship God if his heart is right. Asa will cling to God and will worship him in the waiting. Asa will participate in what God is doing. He will surrender his control, and he will trust that God will finish what he started. And I'm going to bring this question back to you. Like, what do you cling to when chaos confronts you? What do you hold to? And for me, I'm someone, when I get anxious and stressed out, I start holding my hands in a fist, like really, really tightly. And this kind of happened at Walmart a couple days ago. I got really anxious because I didn't know if I wanted brown rice or white rice, and I just couldn't make a decision. And I noticed that for a couple minutes, I'm just standing in this aisle, and my hands are in a fist because I was clinging to control of trying to make a decision. Like, what do you cling to? What are the things in your life that make you want to cling to what's not God? Or maybe you're trying to do like God here, other things here. What do you cling to? My first job out of college didn't really go the way that I planned for it to go. I had studied worship ministry, and I applied to this church to do worship ministry, and they hand me back this contract that says youth ministry, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm very conflict avoidant, and so I just signed a contract. I move out there, and I start doing youth ministry, and I was supposed to be working part-time. Supposed to be working under a main youth pastor, and within a month of me working there, he transitions out, and we don't have a youth pastor. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not educated in youth ministry. And I'm really nervous, and I'm really afraid. And over the course of that first summer, not only do my students lose the youth pastor, but they lose 15 leaders. Like, think about this. Like, I had about as many students as people here in the room tonight. And imagine you lose 2 people that you trust in a ministry as a middle school kid. Like, that's rough. And I'm just holding the pieces of this ministry, and I don't know what to do. Like, y'all know me. Y'all know I should not be like a youth pastor. Like, I don't go crazy. I don't stay up late. Like, that's not my thing. Y'all know that this is not the job that I'm created for. And I'm just like, God, I don't know what to do. And so I start clinging to things. I start clinging to information and to books that I can find because something isn't working in this ministry. My students aren't hearing from God. They're not being changed. Something isn't working right. But maybe if I have like a really great game and I hold on to that, and I buy all the right snacks and I hold on to that, and I have a really great story for this sermon, and I make sure that the worship set's really good, and I make sure that parents know what's going on, and I'm clinging to all of these things. And for months and months and months, I clung to everything I could that wasn't God and wasn't His Spirit. And for months and months and months, I would show up to youth on Wednesday night, on a night where my job is to lead people into faithful worship, and it was the last place I wanted to be at. Because night after night, I was exhausted. Like, my students, they would just be on their phone the whole time. They wouldn't talk to anybody. They would vape in the bathrooms. They would be like deliberately disobedient. And night after night after night, I'm just tired and exhausted, and it's not working out, and I don't know what to do. And I have clung to every single thing that I can. And this day in October came where I reached the end of it. I couldn't do it anymore. And I just remember I'm just watching all my students finally leave, and I'm like, praise God, like, I need to take a nap. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, God, I'm so tired. I'm doing all of these things. I'm alone. I'm not supported. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do everything. And He's like, yeah, it makes sense, because you're trying to do everything. You're not created to do everything. You're not created to control. You're not designed that way. I literally did not design you to control and to micromanage. I designed you to participate. I'm the one that controls. Our God is a living God. He is the one that's in charge. And what I didn't see is that when I tried to cling on to things that wasn't Him, I was actually standing in the way. I was standing in the way of what He wanted to do. Because I chose to not cling to Him, I missed opportunities for my students to hear from His Spirit. Like, I missed opportunities to steward moments well. And I was like, all right, God, what do you want me to do? Hillsong just came out with a new album. Do I put their song on the set list? And He's like, no, Emily, I'm like, you don't get it. It was never about the programming. It was never about the right message. It was never about the right song. The only way that your students are gonna be led in worship is if you lead them in worship first, by worshiping me. Like, the only way they're gonna be changed to crave me, the only way they're gonna realize that I am more worthy than anything that they're addicted to, anything that they could see online, like, the only way they're gonna realize that if they see someone in their life actually doing that. I was like, okay. And I came back the next week, and my students did not change. They were still crazy. They were still wild. They were still disobedient, but I was different. And I started realizing that God had a plan for them, a plan I really didn't understand, and a plan that He had been inviting me into for quite a while. I just missed it. Because you see, my students lived in a town that was not safe. We had a high market of drugs around in the area. My church was actually a drop site for marijuana. I had students vaping in the bathroom. A lot of my students came from single-parent households, and when you live in Colorado, it's ridiculously expensive, and so they could barely afford to get food on the table. My students went to schools where there were fights every week, not just like telling people that like they had really weird hair, but like people getting like thrown and shoved against lockers, thrown in trash cans, like middle school kids doing this. And he's like, Emily, like my heart is grieved because for a long time, these kids have had leaders that don't see them. Leaders that have led them astray. And I'm inviting you into something more. And he gave me this vision of watching schools and homes and basketball courts and soccer fields and ski resorts and snowboard resorts turning into sanctuaries. I said, Emily, I'm inviting you to participate in this. My students didn't change. God changed my heart to long for what he desires. And y'all know I'm not there anymore. Like, I'm here. And I get to trust that God's still continuing that work. And I don't cling to those things. I don't try and micromanage and like figure out what my students in Colorado are doing. I trust that God has placed leaders in their life that are gonna lead them well, and that one day he's gonna turn that town into a sanctuary. What do you cling to? For me, I have to cling to the Spirit because it's the only thing that will give me life. It's the only thing that will sustain me. I've learned the hard way. What will you cling to?